Hello, welcome back. We are four struggling filmmakers. My name's Emma. Joined with me is the lovely Jimmy.
Hello.
James.
Hello.
And the other one.
Oh,
And Noah.
Hi.
I stole Noah's lovely this week. I'm happy.
You
That's
did. I
not
felt
fair.
bad.
I'm privileged.
Do we have any recommendations? What's good?
I want to do a. Is it Noah who always says I have a? Oh no, it's me who says I have a recommendation, but it's not a film. Oh no, James usually says that.
James.
I have a recommendation.
Yeah.
No, I said that the first two times, and now everyone else has done it, and I haven't done it since.
Well, I have a recommendation that's not a film.
Go for it.
Not yesterday. Saturday morning, I woke up as most people do on a morning.
Glad to hear it.
And I went over to my computer and I said I fancy buying a game because I haven't bought a game in a while. And I bought Resident Evil 8, or Village, as it's called. Skip forward 10 hours later, I completed Resident Evil 8. Skip forward to Sunday, I completed it. Well, actually, I'm about 5 minutes away from completing it, which is why we were slightly late starting this video. I thought I could finish it, but I couldn't. It's just absolutely fantastic. It's a far more action-orientated version than Resident Evil 7. It's like a new Resident Evil 4 in a lot of ways. The details and the mechanics and the enemy variation is unbelievably great. The voice acting is pretty bad, but that's by the by. If you're looking for a solid, tense horror action game, emphasis more on the action than the horror, you could do a lot worse. It's really good.
I have an anti-recommendation.
Hey, these are always fun.
It's a Netflix film, so feel free to go and watch it yourself and build your own opinions. But I watched, I think it's called Brightburn.
Oh no!
Oh no, yeah.
And it was so bad. So let me just explain a little bit. So it's supposed to be a Superman origin story. What if Superman wasn't brought up right? Cool, fine, that's an interesting concept. The only issue is that's not shown in the film. Like, he has a really good upbringing, so it doesn't make sense why he goes bad, because the whole premise is he's had this bad upbringing, but he hasn't. The film's really slow. It doesn't make sense. It's a bit bizarre, although I will give it, the sound design was pretty decent, and the VFX was quite good. There's one scene where like his jaw is like falling off, and that's pretty good. But story-wise, script-wise,
I completely agree. I saw it in the cinema. Special late night screening the day before it was released, just for the SeaWorld workers.
It just didn't hit the mark, did it? So this week we are discussing documentaries, and I believe, Jimmy, you're going to kick us off with something potentially a little bit topical. Cast
your mind back to 2008. Oscar season was on the horizon, and a little-known Israeli animated documentary, world cinema animated documentary, was garnering a lot of attention because it was the first. I think it was the first foreign animated film to be nominated for best foreign picture Oscar. And that film is the subject of today's discussion, which is Waltz with Bashir, which is about Ari Folman, who is the director, who, after a discussion with his friend, whose name is Boaz, discovers that he can't remember anything about his time in the Israeli Defense Force during the Lebanon conflict in the 1980s. So he sees a psychiatrist friend of his who tells him to seek out people who were there and who was with him during this war, and see if he can uncover his memory. And basically throughout the film, his memories start to flood back to him. I won't spoil the ending, but I probably will later on, but I'm not going to spoil it now. He realizes some reasons why he might be blocking these memories. It's one of the most visually distinctive films I've probably ever seen in my life. I don't like animation. I've never liked 2D animation. There's a couple of exceptions to that. I don't like cartoons. I don't like anime. It's purely like a subjective thing. It's not because of the quality. The quality of that stuff is great. It's something about me just doesn't like the style.
What boring man you are.
I can completely
show
that.
Fun, Jimmy.
You don't wear a jumper like this. You like fun. No, I like stop motion. Stop motion's fine. It's 2D animation.
What do you have against 2D, Jimmy? Let's delve into this.
Teenage
don't know.
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
It must be some psychological trauma from my
Scooby-Doo.
childhood. I can't remember. One day it'll come back to me. Maybe it was seeing the trailers for this. Well, I was 10 when this came out, but I remember as a kid seeing this advertised and thinking that looks very distinctive. But no, this is one of the few like animated films that I can. This and those bits from Kill Bill Volume 1 are like the only 2D animation that I can really stomach. But no, it is an incredibly visually distinctive film. I think it uses the animation extremely well. It paints this world that is recognizable as our own, but yet somehow warped and removed. There's a nice blurring of reality and unreality throughout the film. There's a lot going on about memory. How much of our memory can we rely on? What's real, what's fake? I think it does a really good job of showing humans that are in conflict. It doesn't feel like, none of the soldiers feel like soldiers. They feel like young men who were in this situation and just had to deal with it. I don't think any of them were drafted. I think they were volunteered, but it feels very much like it wasn't something they wanted to do. Oh yeah, it's called Waltz with Bashir because the Lebanon president, who was a Christian who was backed by the Israelis, was called Bashir Gamal, and the name Waltz with Bashir comes from this amazing scene, probably one of my favourite scenes in all of cinema, to be honest, which is based on a true story, where a bunch of these Israeli soldiers are pinned down on a street, and one of them grabs his machine gun off his friend, runs into the middle of the street, and does this strange dance with the machine gun while all these bullets are flying around him, in front of a massive poster of Bashir. I have to keep looking at his name, Bashir Gamal. I probably butchered that pronunciation. And it's this strangely beautiful scene in the midst of all this chaos and carnage. And it just says a lot. It's very Full Metal Jacket in a way. It says a lot about the duality of man, I think. It's a really, really beautiful scene. But please, what are your thoughts, guys?
I like the fact that you mentioned like it's very distinctly visual, because not only like is the way it's done very like distinct, but the colors, like I can close my eyes and I can see the color palette. It's like very reds and oranges and that sort of fiery warlike thing.
Definitely.
But it's kind of juxtaposed with sort of a calmness, especially when you flip to the interviews. And I really, really like the fact that it is animated, because it kind of takes away that, I don't want to say responsibility, but it means that the people giving the interviews could be more honest.
Definitely.
In a way that maybe they wouldn't have been if it was straight up normal film. Yeah, I quite like it added that story aspect to it, instead of having to have, I know in documentaries people do like reenactments, but the fact that it was all this animation style made it flow a lot better. And it looked nice, and it told the story nicer. I mean, the only issue I had with it, and I was telling you guys earlier, is that my subtitles were 2 minutes ahead of the actual film. So I was reading like really, really fast, and then there'd be like a moment of like nothing, and they'd be talking, and then the visuals would catch up, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So that ruined it slightly, but I kind of got the gist of what was going on, and I actually really enjoyed it the whole way through, to be fair.
You must have been sat there, particularly in the scene where the guys saying fast forward. You'd be like, what the hell is going on?
I was a little bit confused. And like when he was at the scene when they're in the airport and he's going over like London, New York.
Yes.
By the time, so the subtitle came up, and then obviously I heard it like 5 minutes later, when it was on completely different
I see.
scene already or something like that. And I was
That would completely throw me off. I'm not sure how you did that.
I don't know. I just kind of, as soon as I realised that they were off, I just kind of computed like a 2 minute delay into my brain.
I have typed it on YouTube, and the top one is that seemingly an hour and a half. Is that how long it is?
Yeah, 88 minutes.
The way the story's told about this journey to like recover your memory, that could have easily been done as like a fiction piece, and he could have explored those war things throughout that. But I think it's so much more powerful that this is a very personal and honest story. Like he confronts the things that he might have done, and so do some of the other people in the interviews. They confront the things that they've done, which is quite a tough thing to do.
It's a strikingly honest film, I would say. Nobody's afraid to say like there's a bit quite near the beginning where they're like, a kid shot us with an RPG and we all opened fire on him and we killed him. or the car that when they land on the
Mercedes.
beach. Yeah, they just gun down this family in this car, and they're like, we were kids, we were scared, we didn't know what we were doing. It's very honest.
There's a lot of fear attached to it as well.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy watch by any means, because this actually happened.
Especially the last sort of minute.
I was about to say that. Yeah. So when it switches from the animation, so when the film actually ends, it has this sequence of about 2 minutes of actual footage from the war. And the thing that I noted about the actual documentary is it never showed anything particularly bad. Like it showed obviously like made like the cartoon of like, you know, shooting people, but it never showed like death in a certain way. Yeah. And then at the end we actually see like dead bodies.
I think the animated style makes it very palatable, but it kind of links into the narrative as well, because a lot of the veterans are saying, well, we sort of looked at it like a long holiday or an event or something, or like we were looking through the lens of a camera.
I haven't seen the film. I was going to watch, unfortunately. Time caught up with me. However, it's something I noticed about when I looked it up. I did a brief glance over the synopsis, and from what you guys are saying, this obviously isn't a cut and dry standard documentary. You're talking about like all this blurred lines about how it's being told, and there's narrative elements and elements that aren't necessarily true. And I want your guys' opinion on like, would you class this as a documentary if it's just retelling a true story? Because there's films which do that in a narrative sense, in which they retelling a true story as a film, but it's because of the intercut with these interviews. Does that immediately make it something different, or is that? I just want to know your guys' thoughts, because I was a bit.
I think I can see completely where you're coming from, because when I started watching it, I was like, is it going to be like this the whole way? And it was, and it worked. But I would still say it was a documentary because it completely follows fact in terms of what happened. Obviously, like the details are blurred, but that's because in his head it's blurred, so it's still fact. I would class it as a war documentary, I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think, you know, documentaries always had this debate, hasn't it, about, well, how authentic does it have to be a documentary? I mean, you go back to like the first feature-length documentary, Nanook of the North, and they were staging things. They cut the igloo in half so they could film it. You know, the only documentaries that are 100%. Well, a documentary cannot be 100% not affecting what it's documenting because of observer bias and observer effect. You know, it's a psychological phenomenon. I think you're right that there's a lot of arguments or a lot of discussion around to what degree is a documentary constructed, which I wrote a whole essay on for my A-level exams.
It's a good topic to talk about, to be fair.
Yeah, that's right. If only I could remember any of it. But no, I think it's one of the more constructed documentaries. I think that's very true, particularly with its stylization and it's the way the animation is telling the story. But I don't think it takes away from. It feels so genuine all the way through, and I think it's because Harry Folman directed, produced, and effectively stars in it, and it's about him. It feels very authentic, and that's coming from someone who knows that bits of it are not. Like I say, some of the characters are actors playing an amalgamation of people. There's quite a poignant line early on when Harry Folman says to his friend, "Can I draw you and your son playing in the snow?" And he says, "You can draw, but don't film."
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier, Emma, about these people are so much more open because they're not being filmed. And it's not rotoscoped either. I thought it was rotoscoped, which is where they draw over live action footage and do it that way, in case anyone didn't know. But it's not at all. It's 100% animated in Flash, I believe, which dates it to 2008.
That's like super impressive as well, because Flash is notorious for being very unreliable.
Yes, and it looks amazing. It
does, yeah.
Yeah, I initially thought it was rotoscoped as well. Like from what I saw, from the brief things what I saw of it, it reminded me of Scanner Darkly. If any of you have seen that,
yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
Which is Richard Linklater's Keanu Reeves film, where it's all rotoscoped over.
Basically,
and it's very similar in style. But to know that this wasn't done in a rotoscoped way is like very impressive, because I thought it was. We all
Fun fact: the artist who was the main artist who was drawing it is, I think, right-handed. But when he was drawing it right-handed, he said it looked too beautiful. So he switched and drew it all with his left hand, so it looks slightly edgy. And I can't draw with either hand.
Oh my
so
gosh, that's amazing.
I know, my respect for this dude is unbelievable. Last thing I must say about Waltz with Bashir, final last thing. The soundtrack is unbelievably good. The soundtrack, the score, whatever you want to call it. It's scored by Max Richter, who did the famous song On the Nature of Daylight from Arrival and such other things. It's got these 1980s bits of music throughout. So Enola Gay plays at one point, which is really cool. There's another song in a club. But it's also got these, what are basically... Yeah, these Israeli war songs that I believe are covers of earlier songs about other wars.
Yeah, like I'm going to bomb Beirut every day.
Yeah, that track is that whole montage is amazing. It's incredible, like the propaganda machine fueling these forces. I could do an audio commentary for this film, and I've seen this film 4 or 5 times. I think if I watched it 100 times, I'd find new things to talk about. It's so good. Thanks
for that, Jimmy. We're now going to move on to my pick. So I was stuck between actually quite a few documentaries because I quite like documentaries, and the classic Michael Moore. Fahrenheit 9/11 and Bowling for Columbine. I've seen them all many times. But then there was also the Netflix one that came out, I think, last year, Don't Fuck with Cats. I love that. And I love cats. However, there is one documentary that sticks in my mind, and I've seen it about 1,000,002 times. And that is Blackfish. So back into 2013, the big whole, SeaWorld scandal. This is where it sort of all started from this documentary. So I'll give you a little bit of background. So it's as I said, a 2013 American documentary directed by Gabrielle Copperthwaite, I believe her name is, concerning mainly the SeaWorld Orca Tilikum. It covers the whole SeaWorld and Orca controversy. Film mixes real life testimonies from people who have worked with Tilikum, worked at SeaWorld, or worked with relatives of Tilikum. So basically the idea is if you have a violent whale, a violent killer whale, or a violent animal in general, and then that animal breeds, the animal's young will also be violent. So that's why it looks at some of Tilikum's relatives. The testimonies are from SeaWorld workers, but also from scientists, because they kind of want to get that factual input, because what they're saying is basically these orcas shouldn't be here. So they needed to back it up. Main story is Tilikum. He is the centre, but it's almost like we have all these sub-stories to come around him. But it starts with his journey from his being captured outside of Iceland back in the 1980s. So they have some footage of, I'm not sure whether it's actually of him being captured or just of general orcas, but they start with there and then they move on to his end destination, which was SeaWorld, Florida. These sort of side stories are the unfortunate tragedies, most notably being obviously Dawn Brancher, who was dragged under live during a show. And it mixes these live videos as well and not BBC, but news footage. So it's quite jarring. It really did hit the market with quite a bang. And it really did change a lot of attitudes into how we view these creatures and what we've been told, because previously SeaWorld were putting out this information that, it's normal to have a bent over dorsal fin, that they only live to X amount of years normally in the wild. And then it was kind of brought to the attention that, actually, they're living twice as long in the wild and they never have these collapsed dorsal fins. So it was kind of questioning SeaWorld, like, why are you putting this out? And it's quite a brave thing to do, because SeaWorld is quite a big establishment. America is known for, capitalism, and SeaWorld's a perfect example of that. It's all about the business. And for this documentary to full on take that on, it didn't even softly go into it. Straight away, it's SeaWorld is bad. The way you can help these animals, don't buy a ticket. That message is throughout the entire film. It's
good when there's a story like that, where at the end it says, now you can do something, and it tells you what to do. I feel a bit, I've not seen it, but I feel guilty because I've been to SeaWorld a few times.
I have also. It made me feel awful.
But in the light of that documentary coming out, you can't help but notice, particularly the bent door. It's not just SeaWorld as well, it's like any place you go. I always notice the bent fins now. I like the fact that they didn't put the blame on Tilikum. He did awful things, absolutely. And I feel so sorry for those families that had a loss.
but at the end of the day, it was his fault, but it wasn't. But they blame the establishment, and you can see that especially when they talk about Dawn Branch's death and the fact that SeaWorld put out a
press release.
A press release saying that it was Dawn's fault for wearing a ponytail or
That's
something
disgusting,
like
isn't it?
that. Despite the fact that she'd been this trainer for 25 plus years or whatever it was, and she'd never put a foot wrong, and then all of a sudden one day, she gets killed, and apparently it's her fault.
You're dealing with wild animals, literally called killer whales. Like,
Yeah.
there was no respect to the animals, was there? I think that's one of the key things that came out from it. And there still really isn't. They're still doing the shows and they're still keeping them in these places. It's sad to see.
There is no more breeding programs for them though, which is one thing that came from the documentary and the campaigning that was set up from it, I believe.
And they don't go in the water with them now either.
That is correct, yeah.
Very rarely does a documentary or a film for that matter have that much like cultural influence over basically an entire company, because they had to change their entire practice of how they go about doing their shows, about how they operate their parks and how they treat their animals, from this 90-minute hit piece about them basically lying to like not only the public but about how they treat their own, what they would call a product.
Wait, was it a Netflix original? Sorry,
I think it was before that.
Because there seems to be, like you said, like suddenly there's like loads of animal documentaries that are like similar, like Don't Fuck with Cats. Obviously, you had the Tiger King with Joe Exotic, and I think all of these are just sort of like showing that humans can be pretty horrible to their animals.
It's done really well on Netflix.
It's also part of the culture we're living in now, where if you put something on Netflix, it's going to have a lot more outreach because people have access to it.
What I thought was quite good about this documentary was, yes, it was completely making SeaWorld the victim, and yes, it made them the enemy. And you obviously, as Jimmy mentioned before, you need to observe a bias, and of course, it's going to be completely negative towards SeaWorld. However, one thing they did do, they didn't just slander. They offered an alternative. So they mentioned about the sea pens, so instead of them being in just normal water tanks, having them off the sea in like these seawater, so in their natural habitat, but because they wouldn't be able to be released into the wild, they would have more room, but they'd still be contained so people could manage them. Because obviously these whales had a lot of issues with them because of their captivity. So it would be a way to sustainably look after them, and then any sort of injured orcas they come across or things like that, they can look after them, but in a way that doesn't affect them. And I thought that was quite a good thing that they put out. So because you can always like slander anything, but if you don't put a viable solution out there, what do you expect the people to do? Like, what they're doing is wrong, absolutely, and they should be pointed out, but you've got to offer that alternative, because they'll just be like, so what?
Yeah, completely agree. It's one of my biggest gripes with a lot of message films is when they're saying, look at this, look how bad this is, literally slandering something and offering no solution whatsoever. I really, nothing irks me more probably in film than that. And in a documentary's case, particularly from the sounds of Blackfish, it doesn't sound like slander, because slander almost implies that it's untrue, but this sounds extremely methodically researched.
Yeah,
extremely well thought out.
It's one of those things as well, like when you were talking about guilt, is how after specifically looking at this documentary in retrospect, obviously we briefly touched upon, like, some of us here have been to SeaWorld. I've been to SeaWorld. I've seen Shamo do all the the stunts, going off a motorbike and all that. Obviously that didn't happen. That would be cool.
I was going to say, did we all go to the same show?
That would be awesome. But no, that aside, it really paints it in a different light as soon as you watch a documentary about how they're teaching these animals to do tricks for food. It's the whole monkey dance mentality. Yeah. You look at it and you're just like, no, that's bad. That is so bad. Like, obviously you can keep animals, as I mentioned, in a very sustainable environment, but as soon as you make them do tricks for food, then it just becomes entertainment. It becomes a stage show at Disneyland. And to take this Disney-esque monolith of SeaWorld and just strip away that facade of wonder and being like, this is the reality, really makes it hit that much more.
I think the best films, particularly documentary films, but the best films in general, are the ones where afterwards you look at yourself in the mirror and you see yourself slightly differently, or a bit differently, and it makes you look inwards and look at yourself.
I find myself really curious about, like, when I watched the Joe Exotic Louis Theroux one.
Yes.
I couldn't help but be like, this is like really fun, like entertaining to watch, because just look at the situation, look what he's like. I mean, he's quite a charismatic guy, I'm not going to lie, even though he's not a very pleasant one. But
Yeah.
you know, I just can't look away. This is really engrossing. This is really entertaining. And the subject matter, I'm not like enjoying the subject matter. I just can't help but look. It's just one of those things, isn't it?
Get back on track to Blackfish.
Yes.
I think, yeah, the name is simple, the poster is simple, and the whole film is so effective. And I love the fact that the documentary then took these ex-SeaWorld employees and let them go whale watching in the wild. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on Blackfish. It was very emotive, very striking, and it charged a load of policy change, which, you know, tick, 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 really.
Thank you, Emma, for talking about Blackfish and the atrocities of human behaviour. So, and now moving on to some more atrocities, I will be talking about the documentary OJ, Made in America. OJ referring to O.J. Simpson.
As opposed to orange juice.
Yeah.
It could have been anyone. It could have been anyone.
I know, the juice.
It's a documentary. It's a very long one. It's 7.5 hours long. And I think they did actually split it into different parts, because obviously no one's going to want to sit there for 7 hours straight. It did actually win the Oscar. And then I think actually after it won the Oscar, they did actually have to put in a sort of like, we shouldn't really be including sort of mini series-esque sort of thing.
Yeah, the way I've been watching it is they broke it down into 5 parts because it was on Disney Plus, and each part is like an hour and a half long.
There's a lot going on in it, and more or less, in one sort of sentence, it's about America through using O.J. Simpson's life and what happened in his life as a case study. But it starts off from his early days when he was an emerging American footballer. He was very good at that. He was a very successful athlete. It goes, and the timeline goes all the way through to sort of like how he became a celebrity and how he sort of rose up to those sort of like those ranks, basically, and how he was an actor as well, wasn't he? He was in lots of films.
Naked Gun.
Yeah, Naked Gun. He's quite funny in Naked Gun. And yeah, he was a mega guy. He was mega famous.
Yeah, so basically it goes from young footballer, then he gets married, has a few kids, and then becomes a film star. Then I think around that time he meets his wife, actual wife, Nicole.
So yeah, he meets Nicole Brown. They live together in a sort of a very rich LA suburb, and some sort of things start going quite badly in terms of domestic abuse.
Very bad.
It gets reported. A lot of things get reported by Nicole, and you even hear phone calls, which are quite disturbing. As we keep going along, he's obviously quite a jealous guy, and then a certain incident happens in 1993, in which Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman are both found dead in the LA suburb, and O.J. Simpson is arrested on suspicion of being the murderer. Basically, it goes to trial, and a lot of things sort of happen. It's against the backdrop of the LA riots a few years prior, the Rodney King riots, which were all race related. But yeah, so it's in the backdrop of that. It basically becomes, for the lawyers, a race game where they use the race card to suggest that the LAPD are deliberately trying to sort of put OJ away and all the prosecutors, this kind of thing. So yeah, we have a whole big bit about the trial, and basically he gets acquitted. He gets found not guilty. The whole black community celebrates. Everyone else is sort of like, especially Ron Goldman's family. And then once that bit of the documentary happens, we have sort of another hour afterwards, in which we see his life after this not guilty charge, in which he sort of goes quite downhill. He starts hanging out with these weird people, and then an incident involving him at a Las Vegas hotel, I believe, where he basically tries to rob someone.
I remember that he stole a bunch of sports memorabilia.
It's,
I'm not sure
sports memorabilia.
I think it was burglary rather than.
Why?
Because he's just a bit weird, and yeah, so he gets done in for that, and they basically, I think they give him 33 years, which is basically not really what you'd think for that kind of thing, but it's kind of like, well, we all sort of know you murdered your wife back in the day, so we're just going to add loads more on. And I think I've basically covered how the whole timeline of the documentary is.
So it's like a real cultural look
Yeah.
at America, but using him as the main focal point.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting because most people think that he did it, like especially retrospectively, but we're now looking at him being maybe the subject of his surroundings, that sort of thing.
Product of his environment.
It is.
Yeah.
He is such an interesting character of a human being, is O.J. Simpson, because especially watching it through this documentary, you see what kind of person he was and how the environment he was in affected that, and the people he was hanging out with. And oh my God, some of the notes I have for this.
Can I ask a quick note? Does it cover any? I've not seen it. Does it cover any of the civil trial that happened after the court case?
Yeah, it does. It does. Not a lot.
Might be worth just mentioning what happened there.
Interesting. It's when they do those tapes. Do you remember, James, of like sort of they're in like a little room and they sort of talk to everyone. I don't remember how long they go sort of show how the length they show those tapes. It's not very long.
After the legal trial, I can't remember now whether it was the Simpson family or the Goldman family. They took O.J. Simpson to civil court for damages, and he was found guilty of, found guilty. And they said you have to pay however many million to these families, and he through dodgy legal means he only paid like literally a few $1,000s, and he's meant to pay millions to the family. But he was found guilty in a court, just not the
big boy.
Exactly.
I've got a quick summary of what I think of O.J. Simpson. This is my own opinion. O.J. Simpson is an egomaniac, narcissist, and manipulative in his own fame.
And psychopath.
Yeah. He's not necessarily a straight. Well, actually, he killed his wife. He's a psychopath, guys.
He doesn't have emotion. He doesn't have normal human emotion.
Like the whole "I'm not black, I'm OJ." Like he used to say, sort of in the sort of, was it like the 60s, 70s? He was saying that.
Yeah, that was around the time of Muhammad Ali coming out against.
We had Muhammad Ali, who was like the polar opposite. Like, I am black, I am proud of it.
Yeah, because isn't the story of OJ to a large degree? He basically surrounded himself in a white neighborhood with rich white people. He almost wanted to be white.
Yeah,
this is eerily similar to where we were less than a year ago, or still kind of now with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. Thank you. America hasn't moved on. America hasn't changed. This is still happening. Black people are still being killed by the police in these situations, and it's remarkable how much we don't learn from these things.
There is a specific line in the OJ documentary, but it's literally the last line of part 4, which is the one I just finished, where it says, "This isn't a case about the people versus OJ Simpson. This is a case about the people versus the city of Los Angeles."
Yeah,
it was 100%. So much more than just OJ, and they made the case so much more about, not just the murder of Nicole Brown, and I keep forgetting his name.
Ron Goldman.
Yeah, I missed out one of the points at the beginning. Yeah. The media, obviously, I forgot to mention about that, and about how obviously in America, I don't know if it's just America, but obviously this was all televised, like the trials and stuff. So you get to see like firsthand what's going on, la di da di da, and obviously, like if everybody's watching this, everybody like it was just like the whole such a global event, like just watching the trial, and it's just such a strange like concept to me.
They pull up some stats from the years that it was when it was showing. Basically, it's news report about how I think it was like Bosnia was around 420 hours. Healthcare was about 450, and the OJ trial was 520 hours of coverage.
I was going to read out some of the interviewees, sorry, that are in this. So you've got the prosecution team, like Marsha Clark, Gil Carcetti, who I think was the Los Angeles
district attorney.
Yeah. Like you got some of the defense lawyers, like F. Lee Bailey, Carl E. Douglas, who was the extravagant guy. Barry Sheck, remember him? Barry Sheck. Do you remember him?
Oh, he's a little
with the glasses and the grey hair.
Oh, he was definitely one of the defense attorneys.
Like he was asking sort of cross-examining, I guess is the technical term. The sort of members of the LAPD who arrived on the scene, who weren't in like the correct sort of like forensic gear, who was sort of like contaminating the scene, and they were using sort of stuff like that as well for their defense, just to like get like doubt into the jury's head. The interview members of the jury as well, and how they did not take long in deliberating over this.
Do you think they feel guilty now?
Sorry?
Do you think in retrospect they feel guilty?
One of them didn't really in the interviews.
I was going to say, I bet some of them don't.
Yeah, well, one of them you can definitely tell that she's a bit so on the matter now in retrospect, but there's one that's like definitely like
very long
committed to my choice and I made it.
They had a horrible time.
Like half an hour? They only like no, I don't think it was that.
It was hours because all the lawyers were all getting ready to go on holiday. They thought this is going to take weeks, and then suddenly they all had to cancel their plane flights because a decision had been made, and they were like, Jesus Christ, this because the trial went on for over a year, didn't it? It was a long time. And all the jury was so angry because they were being kept in this hotel, weren't allowed to speak to their family, weren't they had half an hour of TV time a day, all this horrible stuff, and they were they just wanted it to end any way possible.
We can talk about this for 3 episodes of this series,
so yeah, obviously we spoke about this quite a lot, and we could probably talk about it for another further hour or so, but yeah, that's exactly why I like this documentary. It covers so much ground, there's so much to talk about. It's just perfect, really. It's just so engrossing. I could watch it many times, even though it's 7.5 hours long. All right, I think we're going to move on to a happier tone now, aren't we?
Yeah, let's have some brevity, some levity.
Yeah, I decided I'll go last just to add a bit more positivity to this discussion about documentaries, because a lot of the time they're talking about very real, very dramatic and disturbing topics, which are very warranted because they definitely hit a lot harder. But I just thought I'd go something a bit more lighthearted, a bit more fun, and a bit goofy. And I feel like it encompasses the struggling filmmakers mentality a little bit. So I'm going to be talking about Raiders, the story of the greatest fan film ever made. So the gist of the story is about these groups of kids in Mississippi in the 80s. They all saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and one of them was like, do you want to make a shot-for-shot remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark? And for the next 7 summers, they did that. And they managed to piece together this very hodgepodge, they're all different ages, all different costumes, version of Raiders, but they couldn't finish the last scene, which was the plane scene, where they have the big fight in front of the plane and it explodes. And the whole film is about them getting back together and going to shoot that plane scene, about putting all of their past, arguments and disagreements aside to come together and finish the film that they were making when they were children. And it's very uplifting and heartwarming, but it's also very tragic in a way as well. Even for the positive film, there are aspects of this film which are very dour. Because like the friendships fall apart and they all grow away from each other, and they almost lose their jobs. And the ending of this film, if a bit dramatic, is still quite like, you really went to that far for this.
I didn't hate it. I thought it was a bit dull. in parts, but I did like the story. And one thing I did like the story, it wasn't just the story of, oh, we need to make this one scene and then our life's work will be complete. It's how filmmaking helped them. So one of the kids, actually I think two of the kids, their parents are going through divorces, and there was things happening at school, and it was sort of the realization of growing up is difficult, and how these three friends managed to find a way to deal with that crisis of growing up, but then how it kind of went wrong, because by the end of those 7 summers, they all didn't speak to each other for 15 years. They just completely didn't. I thought bits of it were a bit strange. So you mentioned about the losing the job. So when the guy's like, oh, my boss says if I'm not in Monday morning, then the termination papers will be being processed. And everyone's like, whoa, we're not finished filming this one scene.
They kept on getting rained out, didn't they?
Yeah, because they kept getting rained out.
Days after days of just rain and mud.
So he calls his boss and he's like, yo, can I have 2 extra days off work so I can finish this? And he's like, his boss is like, oh, I'm gonna have to call you back. And then his wife is like, if you go back to work, are you going to feel fulfilled? And he's like, obviously no. And she's like, well, then you've just got to do this. And it's kind of like, this is a fan film. This is one scene, and you're prepared to lose your job over it.
It's all about the passion in this film, and obviously there's elements where you watch it as an outsider, like, why would you care this much about a bad remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark? And especially there's I think this podcast or radio show overhead where they're going like, why would these kids go out of the way to make a worse version of Indiana Jones? What's the point? But I feel like that shows the strength of the wife and the husband's relationship, that if you really want to go and do this, you can do it. And obviously it won't be ideal, but you've done it. And
I did think that perhaps that whole bit was a little bit staged, because then after that conversation his boss goes, cool, we'll see you on Wednesday, enjoy those 2 days. And it's like,
no, I mean, he doesn't really say it like that. He's just like, you have until Wednesday, that's it.
Yeah,
see you then. And that's
one thing I found so sweet. And it's just the power of when you're a kid and your parents are like your biggest heroes ever. So their kids have all seen the Raiders film, and they know they're shooting this bit, and the kid goes, oh, I can't believe Steven Spielberg needed £1 million budget, and my dad just needed his savings or whatever. And I was just like, how sweet is that? Like, they believe in him so much, and they're like, fuck Steven Spielberg, my dad did it with his pocket money. Which was quite sweet. I liked that bit.
About 2 or 3 summers in, they realised that the footage they've shot is just all crap. So they have to reshoot.
Didn't it have writing over it?
The camera that they used had like an A in the corner, and that filmed over the footage, and they couldn't remove it. And then they had the boulder scene, and it just looked so crap. And they were like, no, we're going to have to redo this entire first section of the film. And then they did, and it ended up better for it. But they've got some really great film tidbits throughout. They've got interviews with John Rhys Davies before he passed away. I'm pretty sure John Rhys Davies is dead, isn't he?
No, he's not.
He definitely is. He's old, man.
He's not dead. I think you're doing that.
I mean, he is still going.
I
just felt like he was one of those actors who passed.
No, it's fair enough.
But John Rhys Davies is involved. Eli Roth is involved.
What?
He's kind of the catalyst of how this film kind of became popular. Wow. Because he was passed it at like a film festival. He decided to put it on at the Alamo Drafthouse, and people were excited by it. And
that is such a story that so it was just before Twin Towers came out. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, and they were supposed to they were supposed to screen it like before it came out at this festival, and I decided to put Raiders on, and they got half an hour in before they were supposed to then switch to the Lord of the Rings, and they turned it off, and the entire auditorium booed. They would rather watch they'd rather watch the shot by shot remake of Raiders than the new Lord of the Rings, and they were like, this speaks volumes.
That's amazing.
We have to just continue it.
It's so loved, isn't it? The original Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean,
it is. It's a cultural touchstone.
100%, one of the greatest films I've made, without a doubt. It's so funny how describing the plot, it sounds like the plot of a Steven Spielberg movie,
doesn't it?
He loves groups of kids, misfits, rising up against the odds. It sounds like the Goonies.
Yeah, there's a line about the Goonies in it, about how in the making of this film, they're all children from broken homes and they're outcasts. They're all coming together to have an escape, an adventure together. And I think that's really good. And it also reminded me of Super 8, if you've seen that.
Yeah, I was about to say that, actually.
You know, J.J. Abrams, Steven Spielberg, you know, the copy and paste-ish. But Super 8 is about a group of kids, Goonies-esque, coming together to make a movie. And I think the best parts of that film are them making the film and not the weird alien stuff. There is detail I think you might appreciate, Jimmy. There was... So during the early days of filming, they had to do all their own stunts on their own. And there was a bit where one of them catches fire, and they put the fire on it and all put basically gasoline on his back and lit it aflame. And then they were trying to fan it out, but because they were fanning it, the flame was getting bigger. And he was like, oh shit, this is bad. And then they had to call their parents down, and then I think the stepdad was like, we're calling it off, you're not doing this anymore.
Their project got completely called off.
Yeah, and then I think they managed to get it back on track, but they're only allowed adult supervision. And the guy that they hired, the most irresponsible man alive.
He was pouring more gasoline on, and they had a bigger fire.
The whole bar scene where it all catches fire, and he was like, put more flame over there, a bit more gasoline over there. And he's like drinking beer. He's like, yeah, that's good. And fun fact, he was an extra in Dawn of the Dead, and that's why he was hired.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was in it for like a brief 2 seconds where he's eating a person in the mall.
Oh, it wasn't Tom Savini himself being irresponsible.
No, and it's like, the parents saw the fire footage and they were like, no, we have to absolutely cancel this unless we can get like a proper like supervised, adult from like a film set. And then they hire this guy who's just pouring fire on fire on fire.
There's so many like childhood regret moments in that film. Like the other bit with the plaster over the face.
The mask,
right. So obviously in Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's the iconic bit where the guy's head explodes, and they had this weird, like this really kooky guy who's in charge of special effects, and he wanted to make a plaster mold of the main actor's face, and the actor who was playing that character. And then make a version of his face and then explode it. So they put plaster on his face and put like tubes up his nose so he could breathe, and he did it. And then he started feeling really hot, and he was like, why is this getting hotter? And apparently they didn't use the plaster they should. They used industrial plaster.
Oh no.
And they had to peel it away from his face. And then they called the cops, and then the copyright was like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, they hadn't put Vaseline on.
Yeah,
so it had gone straight onto his skin.
Oh,
obviously you put Vaseline on as a layer so you can peel it off, and they hadn't, so they had to, instead of calling their parents, they called the cops, who obviously then told their parents, but they had to like cut it off.
Yeah.
Oh no.
They peeled off his eyebrows and eyelashes because they got stuck.
And he had to then fill in his eyebrows for the rest of the year.
They have a chunk of it years later, and he's like, oh look, there's still some hairs from my eyelashes.
When you said Raiders of the Lost Ark fan film, I did not think that they were going to be setting each other on fire.
I think it was because one of the parents owned the TV station, and one of the parents was an anchor on the TV station.
Right.
So they kind of had that background and that access to like.
They managed to get cameras and stuff.
It's got more production value than a lot of the Masters Project films I've seen.
Yeah, it's the final plane scene during the credits. They do a side-by-side together. And literally, I was watching it and I was like, sometimes I can't even tell them apart.
Really?
But that's like them years later when they have the budget of doing the plane scene. Obviously, you can tell like the old 80s footage that this is just children. Throughout the film, it cuts back and forth between what they were doing making the film in the 80s and interviews about like the parents and them and all their memorabilia from it, and the shooting of the final scene. And everything you can imagine during that shoot went wrong. Like they got rained out, the plane wouldn't turn, they couldn't get the plane ready in time. They had like a certain amount of days to do it in, and they were like shots and shots and shots behind schedule. And then the final shot that they had to do was exploding the plane. So they got this demolitions expert who throughout the film has said, like, this is going to be extremely dangerous. I don't know, this is going to work. You might, this is a very southern guy as well. He's like, I don't think this is going to work, guys. Like, all these demolitions, like, I've done it. This is the danger day, guys. And it gets to the day, they explode the truck because they have to do the truck and then they have to do the plane at the same time because that's the only time they can do it. So they do the truck explodes. They do the plane, nothing.
Oh no.
And you're like, no. And then they press it again. It's like, just keep rolling. And they blow out the bottom of the plane. So all the wirings for the explosives that were supposed to go off, like only part of it exploded. And they were like, so all the wiring's gone. It's fucked. So the demolitions expert and some of the camera crew go down to it and they're like, what do we do? It's like, I have no idea. Maybe we could throw some wire in and that would connect it. Boom. And it fucking explodes right in front of them.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's like the worst case scenario shit where the guy has to like roll away and because it keeps on exploding and he can't control it and they have to get like ambulance and shit out. But yeah, that's all I have to say to it. It really captures many struggling filmmakers wanting to recreate one of their favorite films to a degree, which in some way they got the success that they expected in the end, which I thought was very sweet.
Now we have something we haven't done for a few weeks because we've been playing games across the whole episodes. We actually have a struggling filmmakers quiz.
Got my quizzing glasses.
Welcome to Documentary Week.
Woo!
There it is! Yay!
So, there's 10 questions. There's 2 rounds, 5 questions in each round. First round is simply higher or lower. Now, I hear you say, how are we playing higher or lower?
How are we saying playing higher or lower?
How are we playing higher or lower?
So, you will be given a documentary to start, and then you have to guess whether the documentary grossed higher or lower than the new documentary. It's according to all-time worldwide box office, and the highest film stays until it gets beaten. The first documentary is Sharks 3D.
The Lions and Tigers of the
By
Ocean.
Jean-Michel Cousteau.
A close encounter with the lions and tigers of the ocean.
That's really cool.
But they're sharks.
And it's in 3D. So you need to tell me whether Sharks 3D grossed higher or lower than Monkey Kingdom.
Monkey.
So did Sharks 3D gross higher or lower?
That is the most dreadful tagline ever. A close encounter.
I thought that was really good.
I thought
Better than
the
Adventures
Predators
in
of the Ocean would
Force.
work, but Lions and Tigers of the Ocean. You don't say
Cool.
the
So
sharks. of the
everyone
land,
has
do you?
gone lower.
Lions.
The answer
Tigers,
is
birds, oh my.
lower.
Yay!
So
Lions
everyone
and
gets
Tigers.
a point. So yeah, there's quite a disparity. Sharks 3D obviously 14 million and Monkey Kingdom 17 million.
It's not that far off though. Surprisingly.
So did Monkey Kingdom gross higher or lower than Pulse: A Stomp Odyssey? These are all documentaries, by the way.
Presented by
Like I've
Honda.
never heard of this film. Pulse: A Stomp Odyssey.
So you guys have gone higher. Noah, what are you doing?
I don't even know what it is.
Stomp is a musical, mate, about stomping.
Presented by Honda.
Higher.
Yeah, that caught my eye as well.
You are correct.
Oh, yes, it is.
It's so close again.
Stomp Odyssey only got 15 million.
Oh,
Right, so
Big up
sticking with
Monkey
Monkey Kingdom, did Monkey Kingdom gross higher or lower
it's
than
a
African
Disney
Cats?
one.
It's Disney
Ooh.
on Disney.
I feel.
Surely
Oh,
cats.
it's difficult
More
now.
people prefer cats than
Both
monkeys,
of these were to
don't they?
celebrate Earth Day as well, by the way.
Big up
yes.
birthday.
So lower, higher. So the answer is lower.
Hey.
Yay. 22.9 million. Bloody hell. I told you people preferred cats.
Is someone keep track of the score?
Yeah, me.
Okay.
So that means that African Cats is now our new one.
Jordan to the
So-
max.
Did African Cats gross higher or lower than Michael Jordan to the Max?
Max needs to be
I'm gonna say higher.
capitalised.
It is capitalised, you nonce.
No, Max isn't
Max
it?
should be in all caps, yeah, you're right.
Oh, I was looking. I thought you meant on the poster.
I am joking. So is it African cats higher? I mean, he's big Michael Jordan, but he's not
No,
cat.
but is he alive?
Fire!
No!
Hey, I
African
did it.
cat grossed more than Michael Jordan.
Gotta be.
But is that adjusted for inflation?
Yeah, probably.
No.
And the
Wait,
final
what
one
did you say?
of this round is African cat higher or lower than Super Size Me?
I think it's definitely lower. Super Size Me is like way popular.
He made
What?
2, didn't he?
Noah?
I thought it only got famous a few years after.
Well,
Thumbs
you
up,
take the
thumbs
risk,
down?
Noah.
It's lifetime gross, mate.
If he goes ahead, then he goes ahead. All you do is taking the risk.
Higher. African
You're
cat
kidding me.
No
grossed
way.
more
Oh,
than
look
Super
how
Size Me.
close it is.
Adjusted for inflation, me and James would have been right.
Next round is mockumentary or made up.
Oh, this is gonna be.
I'll give you a title and you need to tell me whether it's a real mockumentary or made up.
So is it a real film or not,
is-
basically?
Bad Robbers. So, yes for real, no for made up.
It's 50-50 at this point, isn't it?
This is hard.
Such a crap title.
Make a decision, you two.
What?
Real,
No,
made
damn.
up, made
I
up.
don't think it's real.
It was made up
Yeah.
Hey.
by my brain.
Bad Robbers.
So, next one is the Calcium Kid.
I think, yeah, Shadi.
Real,
Was
real,
that
Noah?
actually?
I was gonna say I think I've heard of this. But I
It
think
is
that's
real.
it.
It's a British mockumentary
There it
comedy
Is that
starring Orlando Bloom as a milkman, an amateur boxer.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this one.
Billy
Also got Billy
Piper?
Piper and Michael Minna.
My God, she's just released her directorial debut as well, Billy Piper.
Actually,
She
And
has.
there's the lovely poster for it as well.
good for
He's
her.
looking good. Orlando.
That was
Ooh.
better than me.
So, Interview with an Assassin.
James, you vote and then I'll vote.
I have no reason.
No, I'm not. Don't be a coward, Jimmy.
I'm gonna have to push you for time. Real?
I'm gonna go no.
It is real. It's,
Oh.
it's about a cameraman who obtains the confession of the actual assassin who shot JFK.
That's a
Ooh.
mockumentary.
That sounds
It
cool.
is a mockumentary, yeah. It's
Yeah.
not real.
No, you would know if that was real.
Fourth one,
That's
the
a
making of
mockumentary.
It's
Heaven.
a documentary, yes.
the making of Heaven. Is it a real mockumentary or made up?
A really good title.
I'm gonna go no again.
Yeah, I think Emma's trying to pull one on us there.
I gotta be different. I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, he's going different.
On one.
It's made up.
Ah, of course it is.
Yeah.
Always go with the crowd, kids.
The final question, the
Oh.
flying scissors.
The flying scissors.
Is it
Flying
real
scissors.
or made up? For the-
Get into the mental mind of Emma Pullen. Would she end on a fake film or would she end on a real one?
I'll tell you what, Emma. Going from Bad Robbers to Making of Heaven and the Flying Scissors, if you have indeed made this out, would be quite an achievement.
I feel like the flying scissors is she saw some scissors on her desk and she's like, boom, that's it. So
I do have scissors on my
there
desk.
you go. That's my
The
my
flying-
theory. I'm gonna stick with it even if it's wrong.
5 seconds, otherwise both of you are disqualified. 5, 4, 3, 2,
Oh.
1.
Yes!
No, he didn't get it in.
I just wanted to go the opposite to you. I did get
It's
it.
real.
Yes!
It's about a competitive rock paper scissors world.
Oh man.
That sounds really cool.
Who has directed more?
Ooh.
Is it Michael Moore or Enroll Morris?
I
I
think
don't
Enroll Morris
know
done.
who Enroll Morris is or what.
I also don't know who Enroll Morris
They
is.
are both American documentary filmmakers.
That's all you're getting.
Enroll Morris.
Why does Michael Moore look like Susan Boyle?
I guess for the sake of entertainment, I'll go for Michael Moore.
I think Michael Moore's only done about 8 or 10 films, but
Can I ask why you've decided to go with who you've gone for?
Go on, guys.
go on now.
I went for Michael Moore because Jimmy went for Enroll Morris, and it would be pretty boring
have
if
a
I
winner.
also go for Enroll Morris.
I'm pretty sure that Michael Moore has only done about 8 or 9. Get me Roger Stone.
How many has Enroll Morris done? That's the question.
I think Michael Moore's probably only done about 10, and Enroll Morris looks like a dude who's been doing this for a long time.
Enroll Morris, who has 28 directing credits, whereas Michael Moore has 22.
I'm surprised it's that many. I thought Michael Moore had only done about 12 films. Wow.
Enroll Morris done? I've never heard of this clown.
So, congrats, winner. Today's winner is Jimmy Bennett.
Oh my god, I don't know what to say.
Wait, did you call him? Sorry, did you call him Enroll?
Yeah.
His name's Errol.
Errol?
Yeah. ERROL Morris.
It is Errol Morris.
Whatever.
Enroll Morris.
Emma isn't wrong. You're all wrong, and I won with Enroll.
I think we're gonna have to redo that.
Wikipedia.
We might have to rebuke Jimmy's point because he voted for a person who doesn't exist.
Oh, come on.
Oh, we did the Thin Blue Line. I've heard that's really
Oh, you said Enroll. I thought you said Enron.
Oh, Errol, yeah, you're right.
It's not about how you win, it's about winning.
Yeah, so he did the Thin Blue Line.
On that note, as you can see, as always, really, we're going to continue to struggle. Thank you for coming along on our little journey. Make sure to subscribe so you know when we post, leave a like, and turn on that bell so you know when we are posting.
Sorry if you're watching, Errol Morris.
Sorry, Errol.
Enroll, sorry. All right. Thank you, Emma. You've really shined a light on the atrocities of human beings. But
What?
I don't know.
So first of all, I was smiling because I wasn't expecting you to jump straight into that intro. And then second of all, what the fuck were you on about?